Welcome everyone to imaginativevisions.com. This is the nostalgia trip, but I'm also going to put this in the center stage playlist because I am talking about theater. I'm talking about Broadway. And as you can see from the background here, we are going to be talking about Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. And this is one of my guilty pleasure Broadway plays. I mean, when you hear about this, unfortunately, all you hear about is just how much of a disaster, how much over budget, the injuries, everything. Like just such a stigma when it comes to this. It's like one of the worst Broadway disasters of all time. And yeah, when you see the play, when it comes to the story, the rewrites, there was a lot to take in with that. I'm not gonna go into every single detail in this retrospective. There's actual books on this, on the production and everything else, the backstage drama. I'm just gonna focus on what I felt when I was in there in 2010 when went to go see this with a date. And all I gotta say is this: I'm in the minority. I saw a beautiful disaster. I mean, to this day, I still have the soundtrack on my Spotify because certain songs just still hit with me, like a boy from the boy fall from the sky, or a freak like me, rise above one and rise above two, say it now. Just to name a few. We'll talk about the soundtrack in a bit. Some songs were a hit, some songs were a miss, but let's really get into this and really kind of dissect why Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark was Broadway's most fascinating disaster. You know, there are Broadway plays and then there's Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. This was not just a musical that had problems. This was a full-blown Broadway event where the drama behind the curtain became just as famous as anything happening on stage. Before most people even saw it, the show had already had a reputation. The delays, the injuries, the huge budget, the creative changes, and the brutal reviews turned into something people could not stop talking about. It became less of a normal musical and more of a Broadway legend built on the chaos. I mean, come on, guys. Even if you saw the South Park episode where Randy is becoming a Broadway, producer, or I believe he wrote a Broadway play, a Broadway writer. They literally poke fun at Spider-Man where Randy is swinging through the theater and he's just destroying stuff. Like that, it was the display was everybody's punching bag. But even in 2010, I found some enjoyment with it. Back when I was working at a Tacos and Geeks, I actually still I think the review is still up on the website. So if I can find it, I'll put it in the description. You can see what I saw back in the days. And I still to this day, maybe because it could have just been that one performance. It could have been one of those days where the performance and everything just worked insanely well, and maybe it was that, but I enjoyed it for what it was. It was a mess. Don't get it twisted. It's a disaster, but it was a beautiful disaster. It was you kind of understood, and maybe for me the reason why I enjoyed this because I kind of understood what the concept was, what they were trying to go for, and maybe it was the play that I saw was a little bit, by the time I got to see it, I think it was just a little bit more tweaked, a little bit more, they refined it just a bit where people was like, okay, it's watchable now. I think that's the one I saw. I can't remember because I can't find my playbill or ticket anymore. I lost it. But let's get back into it and talk a little bit more about this because it's the weird thing of how I enjoyed it. I know it was a disaster. I know that the show had major problems. I know the production became a warning sign for what happens when ambition, money, technology, definitely egos, and storytelling don't come together the way they should. But even with all that, I can't pretend there wasn't nothing entertaining about it. In fact, part of that is what makes it so fascinating is about how big they try to swing for it. This was not a quiet failure. This was a musical that wanted to change what Broadway spectacle can be. While Julie Taymor originally directing and Bono and the Edge writing the music, the idea sounded wild from the beginning. Spider-Man flying through a Broadway theater, comic book panels coming to life on stage. a superhero rock musical with aerial stunts, romance, mythology, villains, and a giant visual moments on paper sounds insane and expensive. And boy, wasn't expensive. Based off of my Google search, I think this costed $75 million. That's a movie budget, folks, for a Broadway play. Kind of unheard of at the time, but it also sounded exciting. And the problem is that the show seemed to be fighting itself from the start. It wanted to be a superhero origin story. It wanted to be a rock concert. It wanted to be a Julie Taymor art piece. It wanted to be a mythological retelling of Arcane. It wanted to be a family-friendly Spider-Man adventure, and it wanted to be a Broadway blockbuster. That is a lot for one show to carry. And watching this, when I was watching this, I kind of got this vibe. Like when I was watching, I was like, am I at a circus? Are they trying to be like Circus Soleil and Broadway at the same time and a rock concert? So as you think about it, it's like they tried to put, and I think the biggest issue with it is that they were trying to put too much spectacle. And when you're approaching theater and you're doing a theater play, sometimes less is more. You don't have to like this. They try to approach it kind of like a film budget, and it's like it's theater, guys. You just need good story, good actors, a decent set pieces, and the spectacle, the emotions, and everything else will fall in place if done right. But you had acrobatic stunts, you had these colorful costumes, you had this big screen visual presentations, and literally bouncing off walls with aerial acrobatics, and it was just like, okay, what am I watching? And that was a lot for one show to carry. And the original version, story-wise, leaned into the arcane mythology. And while I could understand the idea behind it, it never fully felt like the Spider-Man story people came to see. Spider-Man already has enough tragedy, guilt, responsibility, and emotional weight to build a musical around. And Peter Parker's life is already dramatic, right? So you don't need to force an extra mythology on top of that unless it connects perfectly. And this show did not always connect. After the production was reworked, the story did become more focused on Peter Parker, Mary Jane, Norman Osborn, and the Green Goblin. And this was the show that I saw. And that helped the show feel more like Spider-Man, but it also made the final version feel stitched together. You can still feel pieces of the original vision hiding under the newer, cleaner version. It was like watching two different musicals trying to occupy the same stage. But even when the story was messy, the cast gave the show more heart than it probably deserved. And that, for me, is why I say there was beauty within the disaster, because the cast still gave it their all, even when they know that the material was not as good, but they still put their heart in all the performances from Reeve, Jennifer, Patrick, Page. Like they all put their heart into this to try to make this show work. And Reeve Carney as Peter Parker, honestly, he brought a soft organist to Peter Parker that worked for me. He captured that nervous, unsure side of Peter. He didn't always have the strongest material, but he gave the character sincerity. In the middle of all the flying spectacle and chaos, his Peter Parker helped remain the Spider-Man is still about a young man trying to carry something bigger than himself. Then you had Jennifer DiMaggio, who also gave Mary Jane warmth and emotional grounding. Mary Jane could have easily been lost in a show that's loud and busy, but she brought a real human presence to the role. Her moments with Peter were some of the times when the music slowed down and actually felt like it had some emotional depth underneath all that noise. And for me, that's what really is the heart of Turn Out the Dark, is the Peter and Mary Jane dynamic. And the chemistry between Reeve and Jennifer at the time was great, especially with songs like Say It Now, which really hammered home the emotional core of Peter and Mary Jane. It's one of my favorite songs from the soundtrack. We'll get to the soundtrack in a bit. But those moments were just like you can see something here within this whole disaster. And I think if they would have started the show with those core principles of Spider-Man without trying to bring the arcane mythology and all this other nonsense into it, we could have had a very long run if they would have scaled back on the cost and the acrobatic productions and just he didn't need to swing through the theater, guys. I mean, it's Spider-Man. Like I get the effects, but you didn't need that. People got hurt because of these stunts, man. But yeah, we didn't really need that, and I definitely have to give Patrick Page his flowers for this as Norman Osborn and Green Goblin, because to me, I think he also, just like the rest of the cast, he understood the assignment. He knew when to be dramatic, when to be campy, when to lean into the ridiculousness, and the Green Goblin scenes had energy that the show desperately needed. Even when the writing got completely silly, he made it entertaining because he was committed fully. He was all in. He did not play the role like he was above the material. He jumped right into the madness. And honestly, that's what made him one of the best parts of the whole thing. Now, the music for me is like there's only a couple of tracks from the soundtrack that I personally listen to. Like I can tell you, just if you have a Spotify account, you can actually just listen to the soundtrack, and of course the New York instrumental, which is brilliant. Boy Falls from the Sky. Then you got Boy Falls from the Sky, Rise Above One, and Rise Above Two. I recommend A Freak Like Me. The Green Goblin song is great, catchy. That's the song I listen to almost like that's the song that pops in my head randomly. I could be doing work or typing or doing everything. Next thing you know, that theme song hits, and I'm just like, okay, I gotta play it because it's in my head. Say It Now, and I think it's called If It Should End It or something like that. That's also one of the standout tracks. But some of the other tracks, I wasn't a big fan of Bouncing Off the Walls or like some were hit and miss. Some songs felt like it was really designed to be for a rock concert more than a Broadway play, but songs like Rise Above and If the World Should End and Freak Like Me and Boy Falls from the Sky, that's just those scream Broadway. Just from the production, the way it was delivered, it was great, but not all of the score was great. So parts were memorable, and then some songs felt uneven and awkward and felt like, okay, it really does struggle with that. And let's talk about the reception because the reception was brutal. And honestly, it's not hard to see why. By the time the show officially opened, people were already waiting to attack it. The production had become too long, was too expensive, and too troubled to be judged like a normal musical. Critics were not just reviewing a show anymore, they were reviewing the entire disaster and production behind it, which truthfully was unfair. Like when I did my review in 2010, I just reviewed the show as it is. It has its problems, but like I said, I had enjoyment with it. And the show gave them plenty to criticize. The story was messy, the tone was inconsistent, the spectacle sometimes overwhelmed the emotion, and the music didn't always land, and the production history was impossible to ignore. It was too expensive to be forgiven easily and too chaotic to be treated gently. But here's where I come back into my own experience. I would rather watch an ambitious mess than something safe and forgettable. And I've had this weird affection for Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. It failed in many ways, folks, with personality. It was not boring. It's not small. It's not afraid to look ridiculous. The show knew its identity and kind of just ran with it, even through the disaster. They kept pushing through, and credit to them. When they realized there was issues with their story, they tried to refine it while still trying to keep that core original idea. I mean, this Peter Parker is a character who still falls, fails, gets hurt, makes mistakes, and he keeps going in a strange way. The musical began its own Spider-Man story when you think about it. It kept falling apart, but it kept trying to swing again. It does not excuse the real injuries or the real problems behind the scenes, but it does make the show's legacy feel fitting. And Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark is not a great musical. I can't sit here and just say, hey guys, this was most misunderstood Broadway play of all time because No, it's definitely not a misunderstood play. It it had its problems, but what I still admired was that through all of that, they at least tried to correct the course as much as they could and still kept pushing until the final curtain. And credit to all the people that worked on it because yeah, it was a disaster. Yeah, it was terrible, but they didn't give up. They kept pushing, they kept going, they tried to make it work, but until unfortunately it closed down for good. But I'm not going to dismiss it and just keep bashing it or do like how much people do with the jokes. It's a show that tried, it failed, and it's a part of Broadway history. It pretty is, much is. And maybe in a weird way, that's why I enjoyed it. It's not because of its completely being a complete disaster, but maybe because I see what they were trying to do within that disaster. I could see the version of the show that might have been incredible if everything had come together. I can see the ambition even when the execution fell apart. And that's what makes Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark so fascinating to look back on. It's one of Broadway's most infamous failures, and it's also one of its most unforgettable swings, no pun intended. It was messy, it was way expensive, it was mocked, it was rewritten, it became a punchline, but it also had a strange kind of magic to it. And somehow, through all the chaos, I still enjoy that wreckage. And hey, go to Spotify right now, check out the soundtrack. Tell me what you think about it. This is Justin from Imaginative Visions. This has been Nostalgia Trip and Center Stage. If you like what we do here, hopefully you earned your subscription. Comment below, hit the like button, subscribe button, notification, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later days.